Right, there we go. Thank you very much, everyone. Good evening and welcome to our cabinet meeting today. I'd like to first start by welcoming, I can't talk tonight, apologies. I'd like to first start by welcoming our members and officers and everybody that's watching online, as well as our officers and members who are joining us virtually this evening. Before the meeting starts, can I hand over to our committee member and scrutiny officer to take attendance of everybody that's joining us virtually and explain how the proceedings are going to work.
Okay, good evening. Can I confirm the following officers joining remotely can hear us and we can hear them? Sarah Kingsley.
Good evening, present.
Deborah Coates.
Yes, good evening, present.
Martin Lawrence.
Good evening, present.
Chloe Hipwood.
Good evening, present.
Louise Symes. Anthony Roach.
Yes, good evening, everyone.
And Nigel Smith.
Good evening, present.
Are there any other officers in attendance remotely tonight that I haven't called out? Okay. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the chair will be alerted to your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you can speak. When requesting to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room and the result will be visible on the YouTube stream. Are there any questions? I will now hand over to the Chair, Councillor Elizabeth Dennis.
Lovely, thank you very much. Right, so item number 1, apologies for absence. I've not received any, and I can see that all of my executive members are present tonight, so I'll assume that's correct. Item number 2 is the minutes of our meeting on the 19th of September 2023. I'd like to propose that we take these as read and approve them as a true record of that meeting. Could I have a seconder, please? I see Councillor Brown. Happy to second, thank you, Chair. And any comments from anyone? Nope. Could we have a vote, please?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Right. And notification of any other business. I have had none notified. Item number 4, Chair's announcements. In accordance with our council's policy, this meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recording will be available on the North Herts website and the film recording via our YouTube channel. Members are also reminded that this council has declared a climate emergency. This is a serious decision and means that, as this is an emergency, all of us, officers and members, have that in mind as we carry out our various roles and tasks for the benefit of our district. More details are included on the agenda front sheet. Members are also reminded to make declarations of interest before an item, and a detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. For the purposes of clarification, 4.8.23a of the Constitution does not apply to this meeting. Therefore, if a member needs to leave the room, they may do so during the debate and consideration of that item and still be able to vote. However, please be mindful of the business of the agenda and wherever possible, leave at an appropriate point in the proceedings. I've agreed that I'm going to change the order of the published agenda. And what I actually propose to do this evening is I'm going to take item 6B initially, followed by item 11. And reasons for that will become apparent when we get onto it. Item number 5, public participation. We have none this evening. So brings me on to items referred from other committees. As I said, I'm going to take item 6B first. That's the overview and scrutiny referral around the waste recycling and street cleansing service design part 1. So once we've heard and sort of considered the scrutiny recommendation, we will deal with item number 12 and then clarify any issues arising from that as needed. Have I got Councillor Compton online this evening? No, I don't. Have I got anybody to help advise on the recommendations and summarise what scrutiny asked us to consider? They got any officers who are prepared to stand up and provide some advice to Cabinet based on scrutiny's recommendations? Otherwise, I will paraphrase dreadfully. Councillor Nolan.
I was present at the committee sitting on it. If that would help, I can try and summarise what was raised in the meeting in terms of what the committee put forward.
Yeah.
If that would be helpful.
I think that would be helpful, but reference only to the part 1 item at this point in time. Yeah.
So, I mean, the part 1 item was fairly brief in terms of what was put forward. The questions are primarily taken in part 2, but I think the part that was agreed at this point was that it would be required. It was felt necessary for Cabinet to consider the options that have been put forward. I think the original recommendation read that it would go to officers for that decision. I think the fact that it was a unanimous vote by the entire committee to refer it back to Cabinet was a reflection of the fact that it was felt that this was something that needed to be done by elected representatives rather than officers. I think that's it I can say for the part 1 piece.
Okay, and I'm going to trust that colleagues have read the reports and also the scrutiny referral as well. And I know some members were present at the scrutiny committee and had the benefit of hearing the full debate. So bearing in mind scrutiny's recommendations on this, what I would like to propose, colleagues, is that we accept the recommendations proposed by overview and scrutiny in respect of 6B, which is effectively means that this item will be deferred to the next meeting of Cabinet for consideration. And if we're going to defer the item number 12, clearly it also makes sense that we would be deferring item 11 as well. And rather than forcing us to go into part 2 for no good reason this evening, I propose that we defer the whole lot. So could I have a seconder? Yes, I see Councillor Willoughby. Is there any debate or comment around the part 1 aspect of this? Is there any strong feeling that we desperately want to go into part 2 to consider those aspects? No. Okay, so can I have a vote? Yes, no, abstain, that we are happy to accept the recommendations as amended by overview and scrutiny, and that we will be deferring this to the next Cabinet meeting for consideration.
Yeah, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to Councillor Nolan for your assistance as well. It was very helpful. Right, so moves us swiftly onwards and backwards through the agenda to item number 7, which is the allocation of additional homelessness prevention grant. Councillor Prendergast.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of updates for Cabinet before I give a brief summary of the report. In relation to the recommendations in the report, is to use the majority of the additional 200k of homelessness prevention grant received this year to fund staff and expenditure up to March 2027. DULUC have confirmed that the homelessness prevention grant allocation must be fully spent in this financial year, despite previously confirming that a commitment to spend the grant was acceptable. The revised plan is therefore to use the additional grant to finance core housing activity in 23-24, such as housing staff salaries, which DULUC have confirmed is acceptable. Excuse me. The existing budget replaced by the grant will be transferred to the homelessness earmarked reserve to be used to cover the 186k, which I'll come on to in a second, of additional salary costs in future years up to March 2027. However, on that note, the calculations have changed slightly in relation to the recommendation due to the revised inflation figures as part of the medium-term financial strategy. So, as an update, the recommendation should now read at 2.1 that the Cabinet approves the allocation of 192,000 of homelessness prevention grant in order to fund the salary budget shortfall in the housing team to March 2027. And 2.2, the Cabinet authorises the remaining amount of 7.9k to be used to offset the cost of hotel placements. So those are just a couple of updates for the Cabinet. In relation to the report item, what this really highlights is the ever-increasing pressure on our housing team, and it is likely this pressure is going to increase further in the coming years. It is acknowledged that there are a low number of approaches from Ukrainian refugees, and that is likely to remain the case moving forward, particularly with our success in securing funding through the Local Authority Housing Fund. However, there have been close to 2,000 requests for housing assistance over 22-23. This, for the reasons outlined in 8.3 of the report, is not going to reduce anytime soon. Hence, it is imperative that we fund the budget gap through the grant for these two posts. In view of the added pressure, I just want to put on record my thanks to all the officers in our housing team. They work incredibly hard to support and assist what are often very vulnerable people. The second recommendation ties into these increased housing pressures. Thankfully, we now have more suitable and successful temporary accommodation in the district. However, we do still have to use hotels, and there is, of course, a cost attached to this. In view of this, I would like to move the updated recommendations as outlined in 2.1 and 2.2 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Councillor Prendergast? Nope, I'm not seeing any questions coming through. So the recommendations have been proposed. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Willoughby.
Happy to second, Chair, and reserve the right to speak.
Wow. In that case, formally, do we have any debate? Nope. Proposal's been moved, seconded. Can I have a vote, please?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Item number 8, strategic planning matters. Councillor Brown to present.
Thank you, Chair. So just want to highlight a few things from the report. So firstly, under 8, the local plan, just to note that the review has started and is almost complete. And the report from that review will go to the Cabinet in January. It's very likely that the plan will need updating. Obviously, it was sent for exam. It was a long time in examination, so policies have been updated, policies have changed, so it's very likely it will need updating. What is highly unlikely is that allocated sites will be removed from the local plan. And the other thing I just wanted to say is the supplementary planning documents are being drafted. The sustainability one will come to Cabinet early next year. The biodiversity one has been delayed because the government legislation has been delayed. So that's just a quick update on the local plan. So we are progressing as was agreed when we adopted it in November 22. Under 8.21, the Article 4 directions, which you may remember, we agreed to approve that went forward as Cabinet some time ago. They've been delayed due to additional evidence requested by the Department for Levelling Up and Houses and Communities. So they haven't actually come into force as yet. And then just to mention our strategic sites. So we have a strategic sites board, as I'm sure you know, and there are 6 of our largest sites. 1 has got outline planning approval, that's Highover Farm, and 5 are in the master planning process. Details of that you'll find in 8.44. Then very important for us, Luton Airport. As you will all know, the Secretary of State has approved the increase from 18 to 19 million passengers. That he called in has now been approved, but the second much bigger expansion, the development consent order to move from 18 million to 32 million passengers, is currently in the inquiry process. That began in August, I think, and it will continue through to February. It's expected to last about 6 months. We're working with Herts County Council and Dacorum. We've employed joint consultants, and we maintain our in-principle objection on grounds of climate change, noise, air quality, and surface access. There's a lot of very detailed written representations being made with very tight deadlines. They're all detailed in the report, and there are links to, if you want to do further reading on that. Delighted that under 8.61, the local cycling, walking and infrastructure plan has been finally adopted by Herts CC. That happened in September, and I actually happened to be at that meeting, that IWIS panel, because I was presenting a petition on the A505. So it was great to see that adopted. So we have these schemes already consulted on, schemes that our residents want to see go forward. There is currently no funding, but we've got them there ready for when there are funding pots to apply for, which I think is a good position to be in. And then finally, EV charging points. So we were successful in receiving the OZEV grant. So that will be to install some EV charging points in car parks across the district. And then we are also there is also an allocation from the government via Herts CC for the Levi funding, which will be which North Herts is proposing to use for some on-street for terrace housing in rural areas, which we're currently in discussion with Herts CC about how we might allocate that. So there's some good movement forward. That here ends my report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Councillor Brown? No, I'm seeing no one indicate. I think I just want to express my thanks for the update on the local plan. I think that the oral summary that you gave was excellent at a high level, and obviously we've got a little bit more additional detail contained within the papers, which are available for everybody to read. So the recommendations attached to this report are 2.1, that Cabinet notes the report on strategic planning matters, and 2.2, that Cabinet endorses the planning reforms responses from North Herts and HIP attached at appendices A and B. I'm going to boldly assume, Councillor Brown, are you proposing?
Yes, I should have done that before. Sorry. I will now propose. And I also didn't mention the planning reform responses, but suffice it to say that obviously I'm sure you're all aware of the government planning reforms. There were some good parts in it and some not so good, and we've done a very detailed response. And the HIP response is from across Hertfordshire, so we're speaking with one voice, which is really helpful, I think. Thank you. So I propose that we endorse the recommendation.
Excellent. Thank you for the update on the summary on recommendation 2.2 as well. So proposed, seconder? Yep, Councillor Hoskins. I'm not supposing there's going to be any debate. 3, 2, 1. No. Can I have a vote, please?
Yeah, that motion is carried.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, and this brings us on to item number 9, which is the medium-term financial strategy. Before I pass over to Councillor Albert on that, I will take item 6C, which is the referral from Finance, Audit and Risk. Could I ask Councillor Nolan to present the referral, please?
Thank you, Chair. So the item as referred from FAR, a number of questions were raised. There was quite a lot of discussion around the item. I think a large amount of it was around the risk going forward. Ian Cooper did a very good job. I mean, that'll take us through that next 5 years, how things look, and the fact that realistically, I think however you cut it, there is a challenge to meet the required savings over that period. Some of the items as well in there were around staff, the staffing issues we've had, the previous savings based on the inability to fill some of those roles that have now been filled in many areas, and the future risk around that front as well, and how that may impact on various things. The council tax reduction scheme as well, having led to a slight dip in the council tax base as well, and the impact that will have going forward. And I think as well, one of the items today being referred to there that was deferred earlier in terms of the 2 major contracts we have coming up, the risk around the costs there and the potential impact that may add to future saving needs. I think overall, though, the discussion really looked around the fact that we do have the reserves in hand to give us some time to try and mitigate the worst of the effects, something that a lot of other councils don't have and are struggling with very heavily at the moment. So not everything has to be done overnight, but clearly we need to be planning for the future. And the discussions, the questions really were around that and about how we mitigate those items in the future. So yeah, realistically, I think we did have a lot of questions on many different areas, and thank you to Councillor Albert as well for the pieces he raised there and the points he was able to address at the time. I think everything was covered about as well as it could have been, which is that we do have challenges, but we're at least in position to face them going forward.
Thank you very much, Sean. So does anyone have any questions for Councillor Nolan on the referral? Nope. Okay. As the recommendations from FAR are the same as those in the main cabinet report, I will move us on to item 9 and pass to Councillor Albert to present.
Cheers. Thanks, Chair. And obviously thanks to Councillor Nolan and the Finance Committee for their very detailed consideration. And I think it's obviously the colleagues have had a chance to read the referral here, and I think it's really good to see. I think the amount of time that the Finance Committee actually spent on going through that, and it really helps, I think, actually to improve the way we look at things here at Cabinet and ultimately at full council. As the paper says, the strategy is attached to Appendix A to the report. Its purpose is to set out our forecast of the council's medium-term budget position and how the identified funding gap will be addressed. One of the most difficult things, as you'll see from the report, is that it is difficult, I think, to actually just set out a medium-term position where we are really predominantly here at the moment and looking at 24, at 25, and needing to come back to address later years, in the future. And that isn't the best way of dealing with budgets, and that's really is down to, in many ways, that the government have failed again to actually provide us with a new funding formula and a long-term plan for funding local government. The plan obviously contains a number of assumptions. Some of those are estimates and will depend on future decisions and events. And as I mentioned just now, it includes funding from government, which will depend on the autumn statement next week and the local government funding settlement. And there are some assumptions that can be directly changed, such as percentage increases in discretionary fees and charges. Although needed, we do need to consider the impacts on usage and ensuring fees are set with the correct justification. But ultimately, as we mentioned, that the council is responsible for setting a balanced budget. And page 59 of the report sets out a current estimated target of annual savings of 3.1 million by 28-29. And clearly risks include the final retendering of the position on the retendering of the waste contract are potentially likely to increase that target. So therefore it's important that we are able to meet that challenge that Councillor Nolan set out and be able to make the decisions necessary to balance the budget. And that's summarised at the bottom of page 59. But I think, as I mentioned at Finance Committee, I think it's important to say is that that this council is in good position with our reserves to give them those reserves, give us that bit of time to be able to work out the best and most appropriate way to balance our budget by 28-29, which, whilst it's not a long time away, is still a little way away. And part of that will be clearly consulting in the future with residents about the services we deliver. But it is no accident we've got those reserves. There are a range of decisions in there, and I think we can pride ourselves as a joint administration that we have made the right decisions to ensure that our general fund balance has been strong and has allowed us to make those sensible, pragmatic, prudent decisions over the recent years about our budgets. We've set out a council plan which is in line with our spending priorities, and I think the work done by Elizabeth and other officer colleagues on that, I think is exemplary, and it's enabled us to be able to manage these two things, which in the past were done almost entirely separately, to actually bring these things together, so we are very clear about what money we have and what our priorities are, and vice versa. But as I say, that we do need to balance our budget by 28-29. The majority of that work is about looking at what happens in 25-26 and the later years. That work begins now and will continue next year. Will be absolutely important to align our spending priorities and our policy priorities as we go forward. But as I mentioned just now, our level of reserves allow us to take that sensible and I think long-term approach. Even if the government can't plan long-term, we are planning as an administration long-term about how we can meet the challenges set by us, and the challenges set out by Mr. Cooper at the Finance Committee and in the paper you have in front of us this evening. It will, as I mentioned earlier, totally vital that as we go through it, we obviously consult with obviously our councillor colleagues. We need to take this forward together, and obviously we consult with residents. There were questions at the Finance Committee about why we weren't starting to make sort of spending cuts now, and is this all about an electoral challenge? I'll be looking forward to when we come to the budget meeting to see whether our Conservative colleagues come up with their suggestions about what savings that they think should be made. But I think they will in the end actually take the same view as we have, that actually we do have time to make those decisions, time to balance our budget by 28-29, and actually taking that sensible and long-term planning is the right way forward for this council. So, Chair, I commend this report, the recommendations in front of you. I'll obviously Cabinet to endorse it and then take this report, the medium-term financial strategy, to full council. I move, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Albert, and thank you for the phenomenal amount of work that you've been putting into this alongside Ian Cooper and others over the course of the summer and into the autumn. I think that all of us are aware just how challenging the financial landscape in local government is at the moment, and the hard work it takes to be able to not only balance budgets, but to continue delivering the services that our residents value and need, and that really enrich people's lives in North Herts. I will, if I might, draw colleagues' attention just to Appendix A, which sets out a small and brief note on capital budgets and helps to explain council reserves, which are often seemingly forgotten and misunderstood by those in other places. And I do think it is beneficial to bear in mind what could happen if we are underfunded and we do have to start to rely on those capital reserves to meet our needs going forwards. Right, so that's my minor soapbox done. We've not managed to be not too political on budgetary matters ahead of the autumn statement, so well done us. Does anyone have any questions for Councillor Albert? Gosh, stunned silence. Oh, Steve's going. Councillor Jarvis.
On page 59, in terms of addressing the gap, there are 4 items. And clearly identifies that the last one is probably one that we'd wish to avoid. But my assumption is that we will be looking at doing all of the first 3 in order to address the gap. I suppose the question is that correct?
And yes, we can leave no stone unturned. Clearly, there are some stones that we would rather prefer not to unturn, but obviously all of those things are part of the tools that we'll have in front of us, and then obviously to bring those back as we need to make, if we have to make any changes to our service, to make sure we consult with our residents widely to make sure that they feel that's the right choices that we're making. So yes, we will be looking at all of those things, as you say, Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you very much. And I think the other thing to note as well is that every time we have these reports, it runs through the very sensible and methodical questioning that we have from Finance, Audit and Risk. And I think it's a credit to Councillor Nolan as chair of that committee and the members who are sitting on that committee that we have got a really good, solid level of scrutiny when it comes down to addressing these particular items at the moment. And without that assistance, I think that we would be much poorer. So again, I'd like to just sort of note our thanks as Cabinet to Finance, Audit and Risk members for their continued positive work on these items. Does anyone else have any questions, comments or points that they want to raise? Nope. Right. So Councillor Albert has moved the recommendations in the report. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Jarvis. Thank you very much. Can we have a vote, please, Susan?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Right. Thank you, colleagues. That brings us to the end of the agenda for this evening. Thank you for your time and support as always. I'll close the meeting.